In this second video, I'm going to talk today about the 4 hand shapes that exist. Now, when you glance at someone's hand quickly, you can tell quite a bit about them if you can catch a glimpse of it, and it takes time and practice to get it. So I even still sometimes have a hard time telling between a water hand and an air hand. And sometimes palms can be a mix of 2 shapes, but usually I try to see if it's a majority of a certain shape. And the 4 hand shapes are earth, water, air, and fire. Now with the earth hand, usually I don't see these hands. They're not the type who are into getting a psychic, tarot, or palm reading. And the way you can tell an earth palm is that they usually have a square shaped looking palm with short fingers in ratio to the whole entire hand. The skin could be usually thick, probably a bit more coarse. Think of someone that does maybe like construction and stuff, their skin is a bit more on the thicker side, and the lines on their hands are usually they're usually marked strongly, and it's thick lines. It's not one of those things where you think you see a hand, you're like, is that the mercury line there? I'm not sure. Usually you can tell. It's like, imagine if someone drew a hand using a marker or like a thick pen, and that's how you can tell as well. And with these people, they're usually self-sufficient, they're capable, they're reliable, and they might be the ones to give practical advice to others. It might be the first person you call when you're dealing with household emergencies or even like plumbing. They have a lot of common sense. However, they might find it hard to cope with displays of emotions. So think about a person that's like, might be, I don't want to say manly, but if I had to throw kind of like a visualization or even a stereotype to kind of, for you to understand, think of maybe like the carpenter or even like the mechanic that you call for help and everything like that friend that you have. But when it comes to you dealing with maybe you're having a breakdown, you're having a bad day, they usually are a bit awkward or they're not sure what to do with that. So think of it kind of like that. This is kind of like a type of person where they're maybe not into like all into woo-woo things or crystals, or they're even open to it. They're just not, their mind isn't, their interests don't lean towards that way. So they can be creative, but it's usually to activities that again uses their hands. So like think pottery, wood carving, carpentry, just things that tactile things. And they're usually grounded in the fact that again, they're not the type to have their head in the clouds compared to the other hand shapes. They also usually like to be in nature. They enjoy the open air, being outdoors. It's, again, they could be a gardener because they like to usually work with their hands. These people can also prefer to be more in the rural area than the city life. These people usually don't embrace change as well, or they don't like change. They are pretty solid workers usually. Again, you have to look at other signs on the hand that can add to this and emphasize this as well. People with earth hands tend to be really hardy, and so usually I would say I don't usually see these people get too sick, more so like deathly ill, just because the nature of the makeup of them are usually hardy people. When it comes to people with a water hand, you can see it by their shape of their hands. Are usually, they have a long palm and also long fingers, and their skin is usually maybe damp a little bit, or it could be soft, and usually that shows like the more sensitive they are. Their lines are their fingers, and their hands, it's usually thin. So these hands can be tricky to read just because you might be like, oh, is that the lifeline, or is this the lifeline? So and there's also a lot of other thin lines running across the palm. So it's one of the more, I'd say, difficult palms to read sometimes. And these people, think of this as people that have the water hands. Think of these people as those friends that are sensitive, they're emotional, but they're really intuitive, but they're very, I wouldn't say fragile, but they're just very sensitive to their surroundings, right? So they can be more the emotional friend that might be easily hurt. They can walk into a room and just pick up everyone's mood, and they might have that gut feeling being like, I just know this is wrong, or I have a bad feeling about this. So it is a gift to have this heightened emotion and being able to intuitively pick things up, but as a result, sometimes it can be overwhelming for them. These people can also have a really powerful imagination, and because of their sensitive nature, and they can be taken advantage or taken for granted. And this person, it's usually these people are more open to having a spiritual belief or practice, and sometimes it is essential, or it feels like it's essential for them to feel like they have something like that important, or else they might feel like they're missing something in their life. And this person, health-wise, they might be a bit more weak in the sense that they might be lacking physical stamina, and they might be easily drained, or they get tired easily. And again, so this is like, you're sensitive, but maybe like creative, artsy friend. They might be into painting and dancing and all those type of things. The water palms can also tend to have a higher chance or tendency to have their head in the clouds. They might be less practical, but this comes with their artistic nature as well. And they naturally make great healers, or into like professions like that, such as counseling, because they are very compassionate towards people. Because they have a sensitive nature, and when it comes to in a relationship, they can tend to get hurt easily, and they might find it setting boundaries might be hard for them because they're so opened or influenced by outsiders. Water hands are also people that, because they are intuitive, they can also be psychic even without knowing it as well. And it doesn't mean that the other palms, if you have the other hand shapes, that doesn't mean that you're not psychic. It's just these people are naturally already sensitive, but you can always see markings on the other hands that show your intuitive tendencies, even if you're not a water hand. And an important thing for water hands to keep in mind is that you need to express yourself emotionally, and it should be a priority because it's needed for you to feel okay and for you to feel safe and not suppressed. When it comes to their air hand, this one I will say I see the most. And you can see it by first looking at it by the shape of the palm. It's usually more square-like, and the fingers are long. So and the skin, when it comes to the skin, it might have a dry touch to it, kind of like paper maybe. This is with a lot of people I've seen where it's just, I guess the best way to describe it's like paper skin. And then for the lines, you see like the major lines, like the lifeline, the heart line, the fate line, things like that. Those are clearly marked. But the lines can be a bit on the thin side. So it's a bit easier to read than the water hand, but you still may have a lot of thin lines running all over the palm. And with these people, think intelligence, communication, always wanting to learn. So these people are think of that friend that is always into, and when it's learning, it doesn't have to be like school learning, but it could be like they're into learning a new hobby, they're into self-development, or into always trying to find the best way to do things, or a better way to do whatever their current hobby is. They like to be stimulated in the mind. So think of that with the air hand people, right? And they like to think things usually for themselves rather than be told what to say. And again, it's like intelligence and communication. So they really usually like to take part in discussions or have conversations where they can share ideas with people maybe in the same hobby or have similar mindsets. These people also, with the air hand, they can get uncomfortable when dealing with their emotions, and sometimes they might even overanalyze them. And so for these people, I recommend having maybe like a journal or something to just kind of like write out their thoughts to get it down in order for it to not fester in their mind. And these people with air hands can thrive on a busy schedule. It's not that all air hands are like that, but it's normal to see that. So when it comes to careers and everything, again, they like to use their minds. So anything that involves like thinking, such as, for example, teaching or like journalism, something that stimulates the mind, or even like being a consultant because they're given a different problem for different projects. So it's just good to be in a place for them, a work environment that provides that mental stimulation. And also because of this, usually they do well with a partner that will also mentally stimulate them as well. And finally, we have the fire hand. So this one, the fire hand, is, when it comes to the shape of it, it's usually a long palm. So it could be, sometimes it looks rectangular because it's a long palm. And also the fingers are more on the shorter side. And the skin usually is firm, warm, and springy when you kind of push on the mounts. And for the lines, the major lines and also the minor lines are usually clearly marked. And with a fire hand, think of the friend that's energetic, has a sense of adventure, can be impulsive sometimes. So, they're usually like, can find it difficult to relax, or they always want to be doing something and prefer to be occupied. So it's good for these type of people to have an active life, get plenty of exercise, maybe even outdoors, and burn off that extra energy. And if they don't have an outlet, then they will end up getting kind of feeling frustrated and irritable, or maybe just because they can't get that energy out. So a good thing for them is advice is to just make sure to get enough sleep and to not burn yourself out. So that's something they can be prone to doing. And people with fire palms, fire hands, they can be, again, like fun-loving, adventurous, and daredevils, get excited, and they can have this extra energy to, I guess, like in a way, kind of like, again, fire energy to, they could want to be in charge and be in control sometimes. And so as a result, also, they can also naturally make great leaders. I wouldn't be surprised if your friend that has a fire hand is into traveling around the world, visiting a lot of cultures, or going bungee jumping. And, they might be the one that has that courage to stand up to fight for the rights that they believe in. So if you think about like people that are environmentalists, or people that are that fight for certain things they believe in politics and everything, they're usually found with people with a fire hand. When it comes to relationships, fire hands can be idealistic, and they have a lot of energy, so they can be very enthusiastic, and they can also have a lot of imagination and hope for the best. And they usually have a better chance of bouncing back compared to, let's say, someone that's a bit more sensitive, not fragile, but I would say sensitive, like the water hand. So there you have it, the 4 hand shapes. So try practicing it with your friends, or even watching some celebrities or even TV characters you see on TV. Let me know what you guys find and if it resonates with you, and comment down below. In our next video, we're going to be going over the fingers, including their shapes, length, and fingerprints. I'll see you then.